Hello guys, how's it going this morning or evening or afternoon, wherever you guys might be at? It's good to have all you. Yeah, we're going to talk about the shorts. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. At least I'm going to try to address. I have a lot on my mind. A lot of stuff has been going on in the last 3 days. Some really interesting, really crazy stuff. If anyone listening does not believe that the market needs maturity, I really think that maybe today we will have a different opinion on that. But anyways, we're going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff. $2 billion is, or $1 billion is on the move. BitThumb has been playing some games recently. LKX is screwing around. Bitfinex is in bed with CME futures. It's just a lot of nonsense going on. And so we're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about what's going on with the chart. And you have basically, I will just say this and then we'll jump into the intro because I kind of got ahead of myself. But you have two groups of people that are both wrong. You have a group of people that say, well, the market's manipulated, so, we can't trade, we can't make any money. Those people are wrong. And then you have the group of people that are like, oh, the market's not manipulated. There's this guy that sits in a room and he, moves the market based on orders, and you have these wild stories people come up with. And I hear this on YouTube. This isn't stuff I'm making up. This is actual stuff. There's people who believe that there's a quote-unquote composite operator that just sits in a room and moves Bitcoin ethically, for, based on orders. Just nonsense. Some people just, I don't know if they just drink too much or what, but some people are crazy. Anyways, that's a lot of nonsense in the market. But before we actually get into the live stream, how are you guys all doing today? Let's just start off with a little bit of intro. Give a couple minutes as usual for everyone to get in the room here. And before we actually get started, we're going to look at Bitcoin. And I will pull Bitcoin up on the chart momentarily. So we will get into that. But I hope you all are doing well. As far as the time being, for us it's New York time, so it's about 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. How is this working for most of you in the chat? Are most of you happy with the time? I'm assuming most of you would be busier here live. We want some feedback on the timing. We're trying to cater to the best we can to, work with everyone. We have people from around the world. We have people from Korea, South America, Africa, all different parts of Europe, Australia. Actually, quite a few people from Australia, a couple people from New Zealand. Trying to think of some other countries I missed. Latvia, I believe. Just all around the world. So, yeah, a lot of you in Europe, you're going to be excited. So, 4 p.m. in London. Yeah, that's perfect. So for those of you who are part of the course, you are part of the Slack group, after the live stream, if you could just go head to the Slack group and just kind of leave some feedback in the general form for us, just leave some feedback on the live stream, what we can do better as far as timing, that sort of thing. We are trying to better this. So for those of you in the Slack group, do that. If you're not in the Slack group, but you are part of the course, send us a message so we can get you in. If you want, you can send us a message on Twitter as well. Or you can go to bitrage.com and send us a message that way. We want all your feedback. So whether you're part of the course or not, we want your feedback. We do appreciate that. All right, so let's just jump into the chart here. Let me just check. All right, signal, everything's looking good, so that's good. I'm going to jump into the chart, and we're just going to kind of talk about Bitcoin a little bit, and I'm going to talk about some of the issues that have been going on the last couple of days. So, and then we're going to do Q&A, and there's a couple of adjustments we're going to make to the live stream, and we're going to go from there. So this is the daily chart for Bitcoin. This is pretty much what we've been looking at for a while. It's still fitting within this pattern. So there, yes, manipulation's playing a role. Yes, manipulation's bad. Yes, yes. But in spite of that, we're still able to forecast the market to a large accuracy. I mean, you're not going to be 100% perfect because obviously, we don't have the inside to know when, they're going to do, they're going to print or move tether or, wash trade or whatever. But we're getting better at understanding that as well. A couple things I just wanted to address before we break down this chart any further. We talked about, this move here and that breaking down. We talked about the larger picture of the larger bear flag. And basically, we're kind of having more of a sideways movement bear flag. It's kind of an interesting process. But right now, what we're building is you have an ascending channel. It breaks out into a descending channel. We had days of just selling. We basically went from 8,000 down to around 5,800. This movement out, even though this movement out has been a lot of unnatural movement, in spite of that, it's been more corrective. It hasn't had like the impulsive moves that you've seen in this this ascending channel. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, we have made some progress. We went from 5,800 to now we're at 72. So we've made progress, but it's more of a corrective move, It's not as impulsive. So that plays a role in understanding. All right, I just switched to Aussie, so sorry about that. I get used to using shortcuts on my computer. I use shortcuts for everything I do. And for some reason with TradingView, the arrow keys switch charts. It just doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't make sense to me. But anyways, doesn't matter. So if you were to look at this pattern, those of you who have been with us for a long time, either watching our videos or are part of the course, what does it look like we're developing? So I've drawn out the channels. So an ascending channel, a descending channel, and then an ascending channel, but it's definitely not got as much impulsive movement. What does it look like we are developing? You can answer in the comments. I'll give you a moment because I want some participation. I want you guys to actually be thinking. All right, I want to see you guys actually be thinking about what's going on, because I can tell you what I see in the market, but if you need me every time to know what's happening in the market, then you can only trade when I'm live, and we want you guys to be able to figure this out on yourself. Okay, it's flattening out, a rising wedge, very, very good. No corrections. It's corrective. I mean, this movement here is definitely, it's like we have 4 days here just engulfing candles. It's really interesting. Bear flag, I guess, but seems strange, kind of a bear flag, right? Yeah. See, this is the important thing, though, is there's a lot of people that'll be like, well, that's not a bear flag because, the pull isn't big enough or it's sideways or whatever. And people are looking for perfection. They're looking for a perfect pattern. The market doesn't always, especially Bitcoin, doesn't always give you perfect patterns. You have to fly with what it gives you. So, yeah, it definitely is not perfect by any stretch, but it doesn't mean it's invalidated either. So bear flag within a descending wedge. Yep. So descending wedge, descending pattern, we're looking for a break to the upside eventually, right? So that is something we're looking for. The issue I have is not that we're moving upward. That's not an issue I have. The issue I have is that we're moving upward based on manipulation. We're moving upward based on unnatural movement. It's not organic growth. Okay? So, yeah, that we've been predicting. Everyone, a lot of people are bullish. Like, that's all they talk about is, well, I'm more bullish today than bearish, and they're always bullish. But we're the only ones that really are giving I can't say the only ones, that's not right, but we're one of the few that are giving a actual reason to be bullish. or a reason a reason to look to be bullish, I guess I should say. And like you mentioned, the descending wedge, that's a bullish sign. You know, overall, the percentage leans that way. A triangle, it would lean more towards a descending wedge, but the patterns, yeah, I mean, it really doesn't matter too much. What you call that? Going for a third touch before a sell. I like that. I like that. Did you notice that? That's something that is definitely possible. Bounce off the top of the trend line, then off the bottom sometime later. Yep. Sideways wedge. Wedge in 4-hour chart. We're going to look at 4-hour in a moment. But I'm trying to get you guys used to analyzing the chart, okay? So we're going to take a little bit more time just breaking this down, but it can hit or break the upper trend line, and many will take profit. Yep, that is true. It could bounce off it or break through it. What we'd want to be looking at is the lower time frames for confirmation of what the market's doing at that point. So before looking back to February, looks like a triple touch. Yeah, I mean, you can add, but see, the thing is, if you go past February here, we're not doing that with the trend lines because it adds in old patterns that these were heavily manipulated, even worse than today, in my opinion. And I believe that this pattern here makes more sense than to go back further. So this seems to make sense, and I'm really thinking that there is a possibility of us bouncing off from this trend line. It depends on what happens when we get to it, and you know what's happening on lower time frames. How many times can we touch 6,000 without the mother dump? Well, the issue is that the market has been ready to sell below 6,000 for a long time, an extremely long time. In fact, if you look at on the chart here, February 5th and February 6th, we had 2 days of just extreme selling, and then we had a huge wick that just dropped us down to 5,800. That point, the market was ready to really drop off, probably to touch 4,000, possibly 3,000, but probably 4,000. We would have gotten a little bit of a bounce. The reason we bounced was not actually natural. I mean, everyone believes it was, but it wasn't. Then from that point, we talked about coming back to 6,000, and we were mocked because we went to 11,000, and everyone was, calling a bull run again. The reason why we knew we were coming back to 6,000 is because this was not natural. To drop to see these huge candles and then just suddenly to see it bounce off from here with no reason. There was no reason for it to bounce at that point. There was no reason for it to happen besides manipulated movement. Every time we've hit 6,000 since then, the market has been propped up. We've seen tether come in. We've seen manipulated movement every single time. So the reason we're above 6,000 today is not because Bitcoin's worth more than 6,000. Even though I'm not saying it's not, that's not the reason. The reason is because it's been propped up. Had we allowed the market to drop below 6,000, find its equilibrium, and then move off from that point, we might be above 8,000 today. We don't really know. It's hard to say. But definitely the fact that we're allowing the market and to be manipulated in such a way, it kind of handicaps the market really from finding its true place. Okay, so back to what I was talking about here. So what I'm seeing, and this is something that, again, you have to really, a lot of people will not see this, but we mentioned this before we had this done. So this is something we've been talking about for a long time, and it's played out. So we were seeing this as a bear flag. Okay, we had this movement down, we had this movement up, and we were predicting this movement down. That happened. But what happened from there is we had this kind of double or triple bottom. It's pretty much a double bottom. This didn't really come down close, but you say double bottom here, and then we moved off from it. it looks like we're just forming a bigger pattern of this flag. So to see this even break this trend line and even come up here and test that area does not mean it invalidated the pattern. It just means we're developing a bigger bear flag. People do not like to hear stuff like this because they're not used to seeing the market in these terms. What they're used to seeing and hearing is we're green, we're moving upwards, so we're bullish. As soon as we break this trend line, which a lot of people are seeing this trend line, we're not the only ones showing you this trend line. It's not, it doesn't take rocket science to see that on a chart. Once we break that trend line, everybody is going to go bullish again. If we break it, we don't have to, but if we break it, everyone's going to go bullish again. Just the way they've done in the past. Like, when we were at the end of July here, and also at the end of May, when we were ridiculed, and we told everyone, it's not going to go up much farther. It's going to break down. We were ridiculed for that. In fact, we had hate, tons of hate. And at that point, it looked like the trend line was broken. Everyone was going crazy. Oh, we're bullish. Bitcoin's going to 100,000, it's going to 1 million, it's going to be $1 billion. I have 1/10 of a Bitcoin, I'll be a billionaire. The FOMO, the emotional charge was so great that people were not thinking. And this is the biggest issue in market trading, is that people get emotionally attached to a move and they're not willing to see what the chart is actually developing. So this is the most likely scenario to play out. Whether it plays out like this, where we just move up from here, or it breaks down, then moves back up, or if it breaks down and just breaks off from there. That's possible. All these things are possible. And we have to look at the lower time frames to forecast those smaller moves within this flag. But to see this develop out and to move higher before dropping off, it's not off the table. It's not something that you should be ignoring. That being said, we have to keep in mind that because of the manipulation of the market, because of the nonsense that's going on, that things can happen really quickly. And things have happened really quickly. So it's something that you really have to be on your game about. If we have time, I'm going to address stop losses and talk about that because we had some questions about that. If we don't have time, I'm going to make a video for you guys about it. But I do just want to mention this point before we move on, and that is that do not trade, especially on BitMEX, but do not trade any market without a stop loss. It's just the most ridiculous thing to do, and anyone who tells you not to use stop losses, you'd be better off jumping off a cliff than listening to them. It's the worst advice in the world. Use stop losses. You're going to, once in a while, get stopped out, and then immediately the market's going to turn around and do exactly what you thought. And you can adjust and learn to move your stop losses, and I'm going to talk about this if we have time. But if you do not use stop losses, you will lose your account. Even if you're the best trader in the world, you'll lose your account. I cannot harp on that enough. Hey, Marion, how's it going? Let's see here. Okay, I think I addressed what I was trying to with that. So, bigger bear flag pattern. Now, it's also important to understand that Bitcoin could develop a different pattern. So it's not like, you have this bear flag that's developing out and this just has to develop. It just has to fully develop and then has to fully play out. It doesn't. Okay? It doesn't actually have to. It's just that this is what statistically, just the market statistically move this way. What can happen is that you can have the bear flag that played out like this. That was a bear flag. It played out. We didn't get that bigger sell because obviously, the market was propped up by Tether at that point. But sometimes you just get the smaller pattern and then it just develops something else. So that's possible. But if it develops something else, it's going to show you that. So it's not like it's just going to be like, oh, the market just went without me. You should never feel like that, And we listen to some YouTube channels once in a while just to hear what other people are saying to get a context of what the market's at. And some people actually talk like that. Like, well, you don't really know what the market's doing. You know, everybody loses, 7 to 8 trades out of 10. And it's like, that's just total crap. Good traders do not lose the majority of their trades. They lose the minority of trades. They do lose trades. They do get stopped out. They do use stop losses, but it's a small number, not the larger portion. So that's just nonsense. All right, so let's break this down. Let's break this down because I know I tend to ramble a little bit more than Joe does. So you'll notice that, let's just zoom this out a little bit here. So when you break this down from the daily, obviously you have a lot more data to look at. It's like magnifying glass here. Within the lower time frame, so if you have a bear flag on the higher time frame, you can have a bull flag on lower time frames. You can have multiple bull flags on lower time frames. It's understanding the bigger picture. It's understanding where we're headed, the most likely scenario to play out. And when you understand the most likely scenario to play out, you can be like, okay, so we had descending channel here. It kind of moved into corrective. We never really got that nice impulsive move on the 4 hour. If we break it down here to the 1 hour, we do have a few impulsive movements, but they're very sloppy. You could still have gotten in on them. In fact, there are several here that were fairly decent. I mean, you had this flag here is quite sloppy, but you could have got in on that and made some money. But then you would have had to been looking at that pattern we're talking about and expecting that this could turn around because it moves right back up. That being said, these two moves here were not natural. Those were two manipulated moves, 100%. There's nothing natural about them. So it's important to understand that. So yeah, you could have made money on that trade, but it wasn't natural. So don't beat yourself up if you missed it. The moves I'm looking at, I'm drawing on my chart here. The moves I'm looking at are moves like this. Okay? They're a little bit cleaner. You have a tight ascending channel. Within an ascending channel, you have multiple touches so far. These are the moves I'm looking at because even if they're not big sells, as this moves up correctively within this channel, seeing a sell-off from that, it makes sense to see that happen. I don't trade on BitMEX. I was trading on BitMEX, and I did really well. I mean, I actually turned about 1/10 of a Bitcoin into a Bitcoin in several hours. It was like half a day. So to answer your question, I do not trade on there no longer because several reasons. Ethical is one of them, but the biggest reason is we preach against BitMEX, and it kind of seems hypocritical for me to trade on BitMEX and preach against it. So no, the fees don't kill your trading on BitMEX if you know how to trade. If you're using limit orders, which is how I trade, I actually was making profit on the actual order and profit on the move. So no, fees should not kill your P&L. That's the way people who don't know how to trade, that's how they lose money. But even people that are decent at trading will lose money on BitMEX just because it's cutthroat. They're out to steal your money. So, but no, if you know how to trade BitMEX, you know what you're doing, you're really good at charting, you're really on your game, you can make really good money. In fact, you can make money. You can make a Bitcoin within several weeks of trading just from fees, just from rebate fees, doing limit orders on BitMEX. So I'm not recommending you do that, but I'm just saying if you are good, you're on your game, you can do it. So okay, anyways. So I was talking about this. So ascending channel within ascending channel. These are the type of patterns I'm looking for. If this breaks, I'll get tagged into a move on that type of thing. I'm still watching this to see how it plays out. Looking at the 15-minute chart, So you have, you know, these moves like this. So you look at that, it breaks down. Then you have a small bull flag, which has a little bit of movement on the top here. You have probably about a 60 buck move. If you had caught it all the way up to here, that would have been really smooth. And then you just kind of look at the bigger pattern, which the bigger pattern appears to be this. If that's true, then we would be looking at this to move further up to the upside. But these, again, it's a small channel. This is a 15-minute chart. So these things are not going to be perfect. So don't expect them to be perfect. But you can make money on these trades. That's the point. And, you know, even moves like this, it's moving sideways within this channel. You should be expecting this to break out. And then at the end here, you have this hover. We talk about the hover in our course. We talk about it in videos. It's this hover like this would tend to break to the downside, especially in ascending channel. But this is not a fully developed channel, and it's a 15-minute chart, and it's Bitcoin. So I would have been expecting this to break the upside just because the impulse was from the bottom. So we had impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse. So I would have expected this to break to the upside rather than the downside, simply because we're in that three-wave pattern, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction. So that's what I would have been looking at. Sometimes you have to look at both sides. For instance, on the higher time frames, if you have an ascending channel and it gets really long, like if it gets to this outward area, what happens here on the 1 and 4 hour is important. Even a descending channel can break to the upside, especially if you have a higher pattern like a daily or weekly that's playing out. So that's really important to be paying attention to. All right, I guess at this point, does anyone have any questions? I know I've kind of ranted a little bit about Bitcoin here, but does anyone have any questions on Bitcoin before we move on from Bitcoin? Anything I didn't address or you want addressed? I'm going to do a video. If we don't get to stop losses in the live stream, I'm going to do a video on stop losses for you guys, just because it's like super important. I'm going to break it down into how to set it up on your chart, how you would set a stop loss based on pattern breaks, and how to do 1% stop loss, all that. So we will do that either here or tomorrow. I mean, probably tomorrow would be the video if we don't do here. Truth Blitz targets. I didn't really specify targets. They're kind of areas. We can go back in a minute. Okay, use shorts. That's a good thing. I will talk about shorts. All right. Let's talk about shorts, and then I will just come back in a moment and just do an overview. But shorts is something good to look at. We don't really talk about shorts a whole lot, but this is something that definitely needs to be addressed. It's just really crazy, in my opinion. So, Truth Blitz, in my opinion, we are breaking below 6,000 again. It's not going to happen tomorrow, in my opinion. But, yeah, I believe that it is inevitable. And I can explain why I believe that. But just for now, I do believe that that is what's going to happen. Talk about correction with slow momentum. I can re-ask that question after we finish Bitcoin. I will talk about that. All right, so Bitcoin shorts. This is on Bitfinex. I may be able to pull up a thing for BitMEX as well in a minute. But so we're familiar with this kind of upward movement of shorts, kind of this corrective. You can't chart shorts and longs. Just want to make that clear. You can't actually chart this. Sometimes it fits, sometimes it works, but it's not price action, so you can't actually legitimately chart it. Sometimes it does fit. Like the descending channel, it breaks out impulsively. But this is, again, these shorts are not natural. These longs are not natural. So I guess my point is I don't want you to get caught up in thinking that this is so predictable because they're going to catch you on the wrong side. I guess that's my point. But anyways, that being said, we'll just go with it. Ascending channel, sloppy ascending channel, and then it descends. But so we're used to kind of that corrective movement up with building of shorts, and then it gets liquidated in a big move. What's interesting is since about the 24th, we've had the very impulsive movement down on shorts. We've been liquidating shorts. And then suddenly, we have this extremely impulsive movement out of nowhere, it seems, where shorts are just going crazy. It's not like they're slowly building up. It's just like all of a sudden they're just there. Just tons of shorts. What's interesting to me about this is some of the other things that are happening in the market. There was let's see. I want to make sure I have the date right on this before I say. Hold on a second. Okay. So I think that's correct. Anyways, there was on OKX, and I will actually, I will try to link this for you guys later, but on OKX there was they say a Bitcoin whale who made an enormous losing bet, and he went too big on a long position, and it got liquidated. 460 million got liquidated, and it couldn't be covered. This is total crap. I mean, seriously, this is total crap. If anyone buys this, it's a farce. It's 100% a farce. This was a money laundering trick. And within this money laundering trick, it was a trick that keeps OKX from looking bad because, okay, it was just some whale that went long and lost, and now the traders on OKX have to pay for it because the insurance fund couldn't cover it. It's a game. It's a total game. It wasn't a whale because if you had an exchange, and OKX is a huge exchange for Asian trading, if you had an exchange this big, would you not have stops in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening? It doesn't make sense at all. I don't believe it. I don't believe it for 1 second. I believe what happened is this was a money laundering gig, and they did it in this way to make it look like a whale. It was a whale's fault. Because OKX can't say, well, we had an issue and now the traders have to pay. So I don't believe it for one moment that was a whale. I believe it was a calculated move by the exchange to steal money. It's exactly what I believe. OKX and also BitThumb are total scam exchanges. They're just absolute scams. BitThumb created I can never remember what it's called. I always forget what it's called. They created a coin. Give me a moment. I'll remember. If you know what I'm talking about, you can comment it. It starts with a P. PopChain. It's on the tip of my tongue. PopChain. They created a coin called PopChain, and they immediately released it to their exchange, and they owned 91% of it. It was just a total scam, total gimmick, and they were planning on doing an ICO, and I still think they are planning on it, but they've been planning a lot of scam nonsense like that, and it just, their whole point appears to be, like most of the exchanges, just to take your money. Yeah, I know I'm ranting a little bit, but I guess I was expecting most of you had probably heard some of this news. So if you hadn't heard about the news of a Bitcoin whale, quote unquote a Bitcoin whale, making a huge long position, $416 million long position, but got liquidated and couldn't cover it. That's what I was talking about with that. And the reason I mentioned PopChain was because this happened on OKX. So my point is that OKX is manipulating the market in their own way. They're part of money laundering as well. Yeah, we haven't had any drop frames on the stream, so it should be good. A lot of people, and I understand some people want facts, some people are very fact-based, and so am I. And everything we talk about, if I mention something like this, it's based on a lot of research I've done. I may not be able to share it all with you guys here because we don't have time, but it is research I've done, so it's not like I just came up with the top of my head. The point, I guess, that this accumulates into, and the other thing I want to mention as well, is, hold on, let me find the article I'm looking for. Okay, here I found it. So the other thing is that there was on the 31st, so that's why I mentioned the 3 days. The last 3 days have been really crazy. Nearly $1 billion was moved from a Silk Road related wallet. And if you're familiar with Silk Road, it's basically the black market. What's interesting is that Bitfinex, Backpage, and I believe OKX, I can't prove that, but the rest of them is provable, have been involved in black market trading. Everything from drugs to, some people believe, guns. Again, I'm not sure that that's provable, but I do believe the drugs is fairly provable. Backpage was shut down because of this money laundering, but there have been links to Bitfinex was the source, or the bank, if you will, for Backpage, and that's how they laundered money. So it went through Backpage, through Bitfinex, and then Bitfinex had a way of washing that money through trading it. And that's what we believe was the purpose behind Tether, was create a coin that you can trade through different cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin or altcoins. And you trade it through, and you wash the money. And when the money comes out on the other end, you have free Bitcoin, and it's hard to trace. It becomes really hard to trace that way. And that is what we believe is the purpose behind Bitcoin. Some people are saying that this $1 billion is not related to Silk Road, but it's actually related to Mt. Gox. I guess that is possible. It doesn't really make sense to me, because if you analyze the movement of the funds, it's consistent with CIA, what the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency in the U.S., calls, they refer to it as money laundering, but they call it hiding the trail. Hiding the trail money. That's what the purpose. So it's inconsistent. It doesn't make sense for Mt. Gox if they're doing something illegal with it. It doesn't make sense for them to try to be moving in such a way that looks like they're trying to hide it or wash it, so it can't be traced. So it doesn't really make sense. So this is something that we've had people request more information on. People want to know more facts about it. I had an interview with, I can't mention who it is because we're still working out the information with it. They're probably watching this video. I still need to contact him back in regards to some information, but I've been busy. But we do have an interview with one of the largest market papers, magazines, blogs online in regards to manipulation of the market. So we may be working with them to get the information through that. It might make more sense. Again, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but that's kind of what I do. No, I didn't say that the entire Bitcoin idea is created for that purpose. Tether was created for that purpose. Some people believe Bitcoin was. I'm not convinced of that, but Tether was created for the purpose of manipulation. I do not believe Bitcoin was. Some people say it is. So sorry if I miscommunicated there, but yeah. Tether was created for the purpose of manipulation. All right, so this is the shorts. Just a couple more things about the shorts. If you look back on the chart, you have, let's see, this was August 13th. Okay, so August 13th, we have a similar move, not quite as large. On the 20th of August, again, we have impulsive movement, not as large. Aside from that, you don't really see this kind of movement. Like, this is unique. This is totally unique. It's just not something you see, especially it doesn't make sense because we're used to seeing shorts get liquidated. We're used to seeing, okay, shorts get the kind of move slowly upwards to 40,000 and then they get liquidated. That's kind of the point. That's just what happens. Is it possible that they're trying to throw people off? They're trying to confuse the market because people are starting to predict that, okay, when this happens, 40,000 shorts, they liquidate. When Tether gets printed and moved, we get a price pump. So people are starting to predict and forecast based on this manipulation, based on seeing things. And then suddenly, it seems like they're throwing, a wrench into it. I think that's what's happening. I believe that this movement is unnatural. I don't believe these shorts are natural. It's possible. It is an exchange. It's possible it's a whale too, but it's more likely, in my opinion, that it is an exchange like Binance or OKX that is leveraging these shorts. It's also possible it's just an exchange using these shorts to launder a whole lot of money. If you have millions of dollars to launder, what better way to do it than to build shorts up, make it look like the market just got over leveraged on shorts, and then suddenly the price moves against it and they all get liquidated. Also, if we suddenly see all these shorts get liquidated, we get that move to the upside and see all these shorts get liquidated, the market's going to lean more bullish because of that. It would prime the market. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it would prime the market, be a prime time for them to suddenly dump the market, suddenly dump Bitcoin, just wash it the other way. Because I say that because you get this amount of shorts suddenly liquidated, people are going to go long. And it could be that because if you look at longs, it just doesn't make sense to me. If you look at longs, the price is moving up. Okay? See, we're seeing movement of the price upward. But longs were liquidated. Like, longs are not moving up. We're kind of in this corrective, this small area. But if you go to the daily and you look at where we're at, it's like it's nowhere near a high. It just doesn't make sense to me that I would be expecting, because of the movement, to see more longs. But we're seeing the longs getting liquidated. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I know BitMEX just does this all day long where they just liquidate positions, but it doesn't make sense to me to see that, to suddenly see the market's moving up. Shorts suddenly out of nowhere. It's not like it's consistent. Suddenly out of nowhere, they're building up to a huge percentage, and longs are just like getting liquidated. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah, George Soros definitely could be blamed for a lot of stuff, but probably not him. I don't know. I'm sure he's involved in some shady stuff. BitMEX is a total scam. I mean, BitMEX, the way they wash them. And here's the thing. Someone asked this in last live stream when we talked about it. If you don't believe it, go to the BitMEX terms of service, and you can search through there for what do they call it? Market arm or something. I think they call it market arm. Trading arm. They call it a trading arm. They admit BitMEX owns a trading arm that trades on the BitMEX platform, that's owned by the BitMEX platform, that's run by a close friend of the owner of BitMEX, that trades on the platform. In the terms of service, it says for profit. Then later on, it says that the purpose is just to provide liquidity. So which one is it? But regardless, they admit that they have a trading arm that's for this purpose of making profit. That's a huge conflict of interest. That's just a huge conflict of interest. So, yeah, I know some people that ask us for proof. It's like, I can't share everything I know because some of it I'm not privileged to share, but most of it, it's just, there's so much. Yeah, there's just so much there. I just can't share it. I could do a live stream all day on it. But that's something you can look up, see for yourself on their site. They admit it, no issues. So And here's the thing too. You'd say, well, why do they admit it? Well, they admit it because there was a journalist that exposed them. The journalists found the information, exposed them, and they had to come out. So they came out and were like, well, yeah, we do it, but it's to provide liquidation for coins that just really don't have enough liquidity. But, it's nothing shady. It's all cool, Yeah, right. It's total corruption. All right. So that's Bitcoin. Let's go back to Bitcoin quickly. I will just summarize, and then we will go into Q&A. So we were still looking for this larger bear flag to play out. Like I mentioned before, it doesn't have to. We could bounce from the trend line. More likely, if we continue up further, we are going to break through the trend line to catch everyone on the wrong side of the market. Then we could drop from there. We could also test into the low 9,000s, upper 8,000s, low 9,000. That's totally possible just because of the pattern, just because the market's being propped up right now. But it's also possible for this to break down because this is a descending channel to see this sell from this point. So again, as we mentioned before, you'd look at this on the lower time frames. You'd be looking for confirmation on lower time frames. And then you'd be setting your entries on either the hourly or the 15-minute based on these patterns. So I guess I'll tell you what I'm looking for in this pattern. If I start to see movement, just low momentum movement along this channel, I'm going to be setting an entry to be caught in case it goes. It could go without seeing that low momentum move, but that movement, low momentum movement along the trend line is just a highly accurate way to trade. In most cases, it just works really well. I'd be looking at that. Also, if we see an impulse up, we could see that movement up here or past the trend line. It could break through the trend line. If we see that movement here. But keep in mind that Bitcoin is famous for creating a flag, kind of a sideways flag that can break down. So that happens quite frequently, Bitcoin, so don't get caught on the wrong side of the market. But in ascending channel, we are looking for that as a sell. So ascending channel within an ascending channel, but this still has quite a bit of room to move. We could move to this outer end. So we still have, I would say, a week or 2 weeks that this could just play out correctively, but it could also move impulsively from this point. So we have to watch as we move into the week. It's a little bit slower today, but as we move into the week, see how this goes. There's a couple things that I was looking at on Twitter that look suspicious. So if we start to see, I guess I'll just say this, if we see another 50 or 100 million worth of Tether get moved back to Bitfinex, we're going to see a big move. But if you're expecting it to be a pump, that's totally possible and plausible, but that's what everyone is expecting. We have shorts building up. So expect it as possible we could just liquidate those shorts and then dump, So, that's kind of what I'm looking at. But I try to separate, I try to address the manipulation in the market, understand that it's there, not ignore it and work with it. But then when I go to trading, when I'm actually trading on the chart, unless I have information such as Bitfinex just moved, Tether, or some other nonsense like that, I trade the chart just like I would Forex. So I'm still setting entries. It's a little bit more risky than Forex just because of the manipulation. But when I trade the actual chart, I'm trading it based on technical analysis. I'm not trading it on Tether. I don't trade the Tether pumps. If it lines up with a pattern, I'll trade it, but I don't really trade the Tether pumps because you're going to trade them, you're going to make profit, and then someday you're going to get caught on the wrong side. That's my belief. So I believe that it's risky trading something like that because it's not consistent, it's not natural. It doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so I guess we'll just jump into kind of Q&A here. Well, I guess before that, does anyone want to look at any other charts like Ethereum or something? I mean, really, there's not a lot going on. I can jump into Ethereum for you. Manipulation is not always done with Tether. Sometimes it's just done with altcoins. Sometimes it's done with coins owned by the exchange, such as BNB. There's other methods of money laundering. So, but this is the Ethereum chart. Let's look at the daily here. The other thing I wanted to mention is I will talk about a couple Forex pairs, but we're actually going to split. The plan is to split this live stream and do a separate live stream for Forex. Probably a midweek or a early in the week live stream just on Forex, because we found that a lot of you only care about Bitcoin and crypto. Some of you are moving into Forex. But I think it would just be beneficial if you want to watch both. It'll be available, but you don't have to wade through a whole live stream covering stuff you don't care about. So, yeah, I could get out my guitar and sing for you, but probably lose half of the people listening, so I won't do that. So this is Ethereum. Kind of interesting because whereas Bitcoin is forming more of a tighter channels, you have ascending, descending, and now we're on an ascending on Bitcoin. With Ethereum, we kind of have that sharp ascending channel and then just this longer descending channel. And we're still within this descending channel. We're looking for this to break to the upside. We're still looking at that as a possibility. If we break it down here, we had this. I was looking at this as a break. It does break down out of this ascending movement. But as far as it was like 302 and it drops to 285, it wasn't as big of a movement as I was expecting, and it just kind of moves correctively off from there. So there was profit in that move. It was a good move, but you had to catch it right. These other moves were just way better, but they also were nicer flags. So these were like perfect flags. To buy into that from 318 down to 254 that was a nice move. So right now what we're basically seeing is just this corrective move. Now you might say, well, isn't that a flag? I'm not seeing this as a flag right now. If we were to get a movement to the upside like this, I would like it to see it something like that, you know, really break through the trend line and form that, you know, so it really fits with a flag, and then see a breakdown, then it would work for me. But right now I'm not seeing this as a bear flag so much as I'm just seeing it as a corrective movement that is low momentum. But it could play out as a bear flag. We can't eliminate that as a possibility. So there's nothing wrong with drawing this out. But when you draw it out, this is pretty much how I'm looking at it. You're just looking at it as a wedge that's, or you could call it a triangle, but we're looking at it where we're losing area to move. And usually when this happens, you'll get a impulsive move either to the upside or to the downside. For a pattern like this, it could go either way. So what I would do is I'd really look at what Bitcoin is doing at that time. I would look at market sentiment, but I would also be ready to buy into either. But before that happens, this is a 4 hour. Before that happens, we should see an indication, a little bit of an indication. So we did have this kind of impulsive move that could be a bull flag to break to the upside. So that's something to look at. But this is also a larger ascending channel, which is mostly corrective. So we could see this be breaking down. And like I said, we could just see this move along here for a little bit. This is very corrective movement. We're not seeing really any movement in either direction. It's not really making progress. Since we broke down from here, market's just trying to figure out where it belongs. This was a huge move. I mean, it dropped from 317 to 250. That was a huge move. And now the market's just trying to find its place. Once it finds its place, then we'll bounce out of there. Yeah, I also want to mention about the futures. That was something I forgot to mention. What's interesting is, let's see here. Just give me a moment. I'll find it. So this is BitThumb on Twitter. This correlates, the time frame for this post correlates with the CME futures closing. So a lot of people are conjecturing that their matching engine is the CMA. And I, in fact, believe that the same entity controlling Bitfinex, Tether, controls CME 40 futures. They're both manipulated. It's just both total nonsense. But it was kind of interesting. The time correlated with the CME going down and Bitfinex supposedly having issues with their server. Again, as some tech guys have commented on our videos and mentioned, it doesn't make sense for entities this large with this kind of trading volume to have this many issues with servers and matching, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's just total incompetence. It's not total incompetence, it's fraud, but it would have to be total incompetence if it wasn't fraud. I guess that's my point. So, paying attention to Bitfinex Twitter and also paying attention to BitMEX Twitter can be handy because they tend to, when they tend to have quote-unquote maintenance, is when there's manipulation. All right. So we're going to jump into a Q&A here, and then I'll look at some Forex pairs after the Q&A. So if you want to look at some Forex pairs or some other crypto, we'll do that after the Q&A. So I just want to address some questions people may have. Yeah, we will do Forex in a moment. Yeah, I know it's a lot of conspiracy, but we've been doing this channel for 8 months. And a lot of what we said early on in the channel has actually been proven. There's studies that have come out and shown a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of even news like Bloomberg that has actually come up with some good stuff. So if you have questions either about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency trading, drop them in the comments. We will address them now. Yeah, I don't really want to get too political, but I will say that some of the things that Trump is doing right now are shaking certain groups. It's not exactly popular to say, but if you don't live in the U.S., you probably don't know. But a lot of the stuff he's done has actually been good for the economy, been really good for the economy. If you've been watching or paying attention to the U.S. currency, the value of the currency, it's actually been good for the economy. A lot of the stuff he's been doing. I can't really comment too much on his preparedness thing, but I will say he's angering some people. Okay, so slow momentum that retraces majority of the impulse. Usually that means it's developing a bigger pattern. Can you explain this? Okay. Now I have to see if I can... Okay, actually this is a decent example. It's not always true. For instance, you'll have sometimes... Let me see if I can just draw it on the chart. That might be easier. All right, so let's say you have an impulse. And then you have a correction. You have an impulse, totally expecting that impulse to happen. You know, that just makes sense. You know, and it's a bull flag. You're expecting that to happen. Then sometimes you'll have something like this. And then suddenly it does a move like that. And you're like, well, what's going on? There's a couple things you have to pay attention to. First of all, is the bigger pattern either weekly or the daily? Is that a trend line? Or is there a bigger flag or a bigger channel that this is reacting to. So you got to pay attention to that. But if that's not the case, and you look at something like this, usually what happens is, often, that doesn't make sense, but you know what I was doing. Let me do this correctly here. There. Usually you're going to see this on the second or third correction. It'll just be bigger. And often what will happen is then it'll move, do something like that. And my drawing may not be perfect, but nothing has really changed. You just have a bigger bull flag. And when this happens, the impulse is usually bigger. So usually you have that bigger impulse. We're looking at several Forex pairs that are actually getting this point where they had this smaller corrective pattern and they're just in the bigger range. And when they sell, it's just going to be an amazing time. So when you see that lower momentum movement and it just retraces the whole thing, it could be that you have a correction and then it just kind of correctively loose like that. You have a descending channel. You'd be like, well, that could be a buy. And then you get the ascending channel. And you're like, well, that's still fairly corrective. You're not really seeing any reason to be buying that. And if you look at that, that is just a flag. Now, you may get it coming back down to the bottom. If it does, then that buy just becomes more and more likely. But it could end up just being a buy from there. That goes both ways on a buy or sell, short or long. It's just looking at the bigger pattern that, yeah, that was a descending channel for a temporary buy, but it just developed a bigger pattern. So the other thing that can happen as well, and I guess this maybe is more what you're possibly talking about, is you may get a bull flag, and then it impulses up. You get caught in maybe there, so okay, you get tagged in, and then suddenly you have something like this. And you're like, okay, well, what's going on? Just a bigger flag pattern here. And then you get a pattern like that. Maybe it moves down like that. And then suddenly you get impulse off. It's a descending channel. You're expecting impulse off. But what's going on? And if you get something like that, you're kind of getting this ascending channel or ascending movement out of an impulse. Again, this could develop into just a massive bull flag, but it's often a sign that the market is either reversing or is at a point where it's trying to figure out where it is going. So if you see this kind of movement off from, like, you get impulse, correction, impulse, correction, and then on this third correction you're seeing this kind of movement, first of all, check to see if it aligns with a bigger pattern. If it does, perfect. If there's no bigger pattern playing out, then probably the chart is just developing something bigger. It's just developing a bigger picture. And this is why people do not trade well. This is why people lose money in trading, because they see trend lines and they see trend lines as absolute. They expect that because there's a trend line there, trying to delete all my mess here, that there's a trend line there. If the chart impulses above it, for instance, you get your corrective movement, okay? And let's try and make this real. So, okay, you get that corrective movement. And then we break out impulsively, okay? If you got in on that trade, is there anything wrong with that trade? Absolutely not. That's a nice bull flag. It's a good place. You got in. That's just awesome. Okay? I'm running out of chart here, but okay, so it impulses out of this. And then suddenly it does something like that. Does that mean that the pattern's invalidated, or does it mean that it's developing a bigger pattern? This is where people get caught out. And you need to be able to take a message from the market. Sometimes the market is not ready for that big move. If you've had 2 or 3 small flags, like really tight flags that impulse out, you should be expecting that we're in for a bigger correction. You should be expecting that the market can't just keep doing these little tiny flags and huge impulses. Otherwise, you'd see currencies like euro go to $10. It doesn't happen. And often what happens in the market, understand the basics of economics, is when that happens, you'll have the impulse, tight correction, impulse, tight correction. And then you have the impulse off of that, and the market's overextended. And it doesn't have an equilibrium. It's not actually where it should be valued. So you get that larger correction where the market figures out where it's supposed to be. And then you have the bigger moves off from that. So that's kind of how it works. No, it's a long explanation, but hopefully that answers the question. If you change the way you look at things, things will change. Absolutely. That's why we are so effective in our trading strategy. Because the reason most traders fail is because they get hung up on specific trend lines. They get hung up on things happening a certain way. And when it goes completely against them, they're not ready to understand. They're not willing to understand why. They just say, well, it went without me. That was just something you couldn't have predicted. It just, for instance, impulsive move. What if you get a corrective move that's moving upwards? You're like, what in the world? Is that supposed to break down? All this really has to do is just move down like this, move up like this a little bit, and you still have a bull flag. People get caught up in little pictures. They get caught up in micro pictures. You can't do that. You have to be very careful with that. Now, that's not to say that you can't have an impulse, a upward moving correction like this, and have it break out. That does happen. This happens. This can be a reversal sign on outer structures. In bigger patterns, this can happen. But that's why understanding the bigger picture is so important. Right, John, you're absolutely right. Sites shouldn't be going down randomly. It just doesn't make sense. Would regulation stop scams like BitMEX may be doing? Yes, regulation is the only thing that's going to save Bitcoin. I know some people hate hearing that because they see Bitcoin as a savior of the world currency. Bitcoin will never be the savior from fiat because we've already gone too far. We've allowed entities to so manipulate Bitcoin cryptocurrency that it will never be able to be the savior for fiat, the savior against everything we hate about governments. So the only way for Bitcoin to be saved is by regulation. As much as you may hate hearing that, it's the only way. We need regulation, just like Forex needs regulation, just like stock market needs regulation. We need regulation to prevent this. And it would stop it because they'd be fine, they'd be shut down. It will happen. It's going to happen. How do you know if the channel is bullish or bearish? Okay, good question. Let me actually show you on a chart here. So let's go to Euro USD, and I'll just show you on the chart. So I'll just show you on this picture because it actually broke out. Now, this being said, as I just mentioned, we could develop a bigger pattern out of this. But so far, this gives us a good thing to look at. So ascending nature sells. You have ascending nature, you have a little sell, but I mean, that's not really anything to look at. But this big ascending channel, we move out it correctively, and now we're getting that sell for the channel. So you could move this out to here to get a better context. The reason I don't do that is because I still want to incorporate this pattern. I still want to look at all the possibilities. If this does end up developing a bigger pattern, I want to be seeing that. If we were to look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a good example. You have ascending nature, sells. Even if it's corrective, it's still selling. Descending nature, it's a buy. It's still corrective, but it's still a buy. The reason this works, and this happens so much, is because it's unsustainable for the market to move especially sharply and steeply in any direction for a long period of time. And if you do get a corrective nature that just moves in ascending channel for a long period of time, for instance, like this, very sharp, it sells. It's unsustainable for the market to just move in one direction forever, especially that larger, that steep move. It just can't happen. Take it easy, Dave. It was nice to have you. Are there ever times I'll close a trade for break even or a small loss manually? For example, if you get in a trade or an impulse, then move, retrace it straight after. This is an excellent question. This is something that comes with experience. So when you're starting out, this may sound counterintuitive to what I'm going to tell you in a moment, but when you're starting out, please learn to set your stop loss at 1% and leave it. Let yourself get stopped out. You should be paper trading anyway, so you're not losing real money, but let yourself get stopped out. The reason is because you're not ready yet to make those decisions. You're not ready yet. You're not experienced enough. You'll make emotional moves. And this is what, I'm out on paper trading quantums. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you live on the chart. So I'm going to do a sell. I'm going to do a market sell. We'll do 5,000 Bitcoin. We're going to do a stop loss at 25 pips and a take profit at 75, just random, because I want to make a point here. Okay, so we just got tagged into the market. Let's go to the 15-minute. We're at zero profit. This is what people will do. So they're on a chart, and they're, okay, I just bought in. Man, it's impulsing. It's going to go down farther, so I just bought in. I want to be in on this. I don't want to miss out. Suddenly, let's go to the 1 minute, because some people actually trade the 1 minute. So we're on the 1 minute. Let's pretend, because nothing's happening, but let's pretend that it's just suddenly moving out. I just made $7,000. But anyways, this is what people do. They'll be like, I got to move it up a little bit. Okay, I got to redo that. I just made profit. So let's do 200 pips. Okay. That I just got taken out for profit. So this is what people do. They'll get that small impulse and they're like, wait. I got to move it up because I'm going to get taken out. I know it's going down. No, it's coming up. I got to move it up. It's going to go down. It'll go down. I know it's going to go down. I just a little bit more. If I get a little bit more, I'll be protected. I don't know. Maybe a little bit more. What happens is now I'm at 1.87 risk reward. What happens is if I end up getting stopped out now, I've risked too much of my account. Look at that. I know it's going down. I don't want to lose. I can't lose. So I just keep moving it up. This is a huge, huge issue. People literally do this. They literally trade this way. It's emotional trading. So starting out, do not move your stop loss. You can't. You do not have enough experience to do that. Set it at 1%. I'm going to do a video on this, so if you're not ready, I'll do a video explaining it. But set it at 1%. Let yourself get taken out. Do not move it. To answer the actual question, do I move it? Yes, I do. The reasons why I move it is if I set it at 1% and then the market moves in such a way that I notice what's going on, because my experience, I can tell, okay, this pattern plays out really well. The market just moved in such a way that high accuracy. Sometimes I'll just take a break even instead of actually taking that 1% loss, and then I'll buy back in because I'm realizing, okay, the market's not ready yet. Now I'll just wait for the pattern. So yeah, that is something to keep in mind. But you guys, and you really need to focus on leaving your 1% stop loss. Normal correction flags and bigger one. Yeah, it is one of the biggest things to learn. That's why we highly recommend back testing. Why we recommend using the replay tool. If you're not familiar with the replay tool, let me find it here. It's right here. it's an awesome tool. Replay. Go back like a year. Do replay and just use the short and long position and be like, okay, all right, so this is an ascending channel. I'm going to buy on the break, set a 1% stop loss, and then actually we would do it down here because we don't know what's going to happen. And then replay. Play the chart, record what happened, and if you were right, why you were right. If you were wrong, try and figure out, did the pattern just develop bigger? It's big. It's just an awesome way to trade. Or not trade, but backtest. I tend to think that privacy coins are overrated, to be honest with you. But they do have, I guess they could have their purpose in time. I like Monero. I do like Monero. I don't like Zcash, but I do like Monero. Just looking over your questions here. So Bitcoin will eventually go back to 6,000. Yes, it will. That's just like inevitable. If I was to place a bet, I would put everything I own on that bet because that's how sure I am that we haven't seen the last of 6,000. Brummy, yeah, absolutely. Once you backtest it enough, and you know what? See, we're gonna get stopped out here. We got to move this. I can't get stopped out. It's a horrible way. And the thing is, that's interesting with this. Just to harp on this, just one more point, is if I move this far enough, because I'm paper trading, I'm not gonna get margined. Margin called here. Eventually, it will go back down. And that's where people get in trouble. But I'm done with that anyways. We still don't know where we're going. Okay. We can... I'll come back to that in a minute. Is this still valid? Is TA still valid with all the BitMax and Bitfinex manipulation? Yes, it is. It's sometimes rougher. It's sometimes messier. Some moves you're just not going to catch or anticipate because of manipulation, but it's still valid. It's still valid. You just have to be on your game. You have to know the patterns. But yeah, you can. It's still... Technical analysis is still valid. For instance, we're on the daily here, and we haven't invalidated our larger channel. We haven't invalidated the flag, the bear flag, the bigger bear flag we're looking at. We're still within this ascending channel. We are ignoring this one wick because that was just total crap. Just really the most disgusting form of manipulation you can find. But aside from that, technical analysis is still being, it's still responding to it. I don't really think ETF would help too much. I think people overestimate ETF and its ability to save the market. Is it likely if we break 5,800 to hit 3,000? We'd have to take that one step at a time. Hitting 3,000 or 4,000 is not unlikely if the market was allowed to fall. It's also not unlikely if one of the exchanges like Bitfinex or OKX tries to access scam. They're probably going to dump the market when they do it. If they do, hitting 3,000 is not unlikely. If Tether blows up, hitting 1,000 or 1,500 is not unlikely. But we're not there yet. That's doom and gloom for another day. We're not there yet. But it is important to understand that those are possible figures to look at. When you've manipulated the market so much, you've been swinging it your way so much, someday it's going to swing the other direction. All right, I'm going to turn the time over to Joe for a moment to finish QA.
Hey guys, Joe here. One thing I did want to mention here, Jace, your comment. If Bitcoin does go down to, let's say, $1,000, that doesn't mean the underlying asset is a failure. Because it's important to realize that the reason why we saw $20,000 is not necessarily because people thought Bitcoin was worth that, but because of serious manipulation. That's why we saw that. So, for Bitcoin to normalize and find a balance between what people actually do think it's worth, that is going to take some time. But it doesn't mean Bitcoin's a failure just because it goes down for a little bit of time. So that's important to realize. Did you hear that Buffett said Bitcoin price was tied to the price of oil? No, that is interesting. I didn't hear that. So ascending channels are most likely bearish and descending channels are bullish. Typically, yes. So what you're looking for is corrective nature either in an ascending channel or a descending channel. That's what you're looking for to confirm any kind of movement. And the reason why that is because if you have corrective movement in an ascending channel, it's not sustainable for that to continue to move up. And so you're going to see a break. And then when it breaks, market psychology, people jump in on that. And no, it's not the same guy. We are two different people. Yeah, so I wouldn't put too much stock in what Buffett says in a trading. So if you're trading Bitcoin and Buffett says something about it, I wouldn't put too much stock into it. He's an incredibly smart investor, but he said himself that he doesn't understand Bitcoin, he doesn't understand cryptocurrency, and that's why he's not invested in it. So don't take too much stock in that. We are brothers, so that would be why we sound similar. Should we put our 1% stop loss just under the wick of the previous 4-hour candle? So with stop losses, where it is placed depends on the pattern, right? So if you were to place an entry here, like I would not place an entry here, but if you were to place an entry here and got tagged in somehow, in order for this to make sense, your stop would have to be up here, right? Because you have to compensate for the fact that there really isn't an entry here to make it safer. You're compensating for that by placing your stop above the pattern. So when you're first starting out and you don't understand the market, you're brand new to it, it is natural when you're backtesting to not always understand the pattern you're looking at. And so if you're collecting data, maybe you'll lose some of the trades and then go back on it a couple months later, do the same backtesting and see it a lot clearer. So with backtesting, it'll get clearer and clearer, and you'll notice some of the mistakes you were making actually looking at the pattern. So it is normal at the beginning to not always understand what you're looking at, because it is a skill that you are developing. It's something you need to put the time in to really develop. Sell when the 4-hour turns red. That can sometimes work, but I wouldn't necessarily trade solely based on that. Here's why. If you look at this, 4-hour turns red, right? And then it just continues to go up. So it happens quite a bit, and you had this here, right? Turns red, it goes down, but it solely by itself it can go either way. So it's not something I would base a trade decision on solely. I would use it for confluence if there's already a good position there. Definitely. No, we definitely get that. Some of you are looking for Forex charting, all that kind of stuff. That's why we were actually thinking about separating the streams, so it makes it a little bit more streamlined for you guys that are learning how to trade, so that you can take a lot of value away from that. So with horizontal support and resistance levels, a lot of traders will go on a chart and they'll place one here, and they'll place one here, and they'll place one here. And what you'll find is that if you place enough support and resistance lines on a chart, eventually the price is going to react sometime in the future at one of those levels, and it will be purely coincidental. So the only support and resistance lines that we'll look at most of the time is the pattern itself, but also if we zoom out here, like in this case, what I will look at if we're approaching this area is a double bottom, right? That's the kind of support and resistance lines I'm looking at. Or if we break out of a pattern here, I will look at the bottom of the pattern. That's the only support and resistance that we'll look at. The reason being, you can put so many lines on a chart that it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Live trading is something we want to do. It's something we wanted to do for a while. The reason why we haven't, as of yet, put out videos like that is because a lot of times when we're trading, trades don't happen conveniently, right? So you don't get a trade that you can plan out. It's like, that's going to happen at 10:15, and then I can record a video on it. Sometimes it's not convenient, but we definitely do want to do more of that because I think it would provide a lot of value for you guys to see how you actually would enter these trades. So we definitely want to do that. Moving more tether. I would not be surprised. So yeah, there are a lot of things we want to do with the channel, with the community. We have a lot of plans. We're just getting started here. But we're just trying to find the time to put into each of the different projects to really expand this and give you guys as much value as possible. So, any other questions here? Is there any? I know one of you guys mentioned euro dollar. You guys are looking at euro dollar for the week ahead. We have to compare the live viewers that we have now versus previous times. I believe it's about the same. There may be slightly more now than previous times. I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to compare that and actually see what works better. When do you think Bitcoin will reject and go down based on technical analysis? With that, it's important to realize that, we have an ascending channel here. It is corrective. It's possible at this stage that we see this develop maybe a flag right here on the trend line and then sell. But on the other hand, nobody knows, and nobody has the inside knowledge to know how long this can just continue to move like this. That could go on for a while before it does actually drop. So what I would be aware of is we're looking at this bigger pattern. And as was mentioned earlier, it is possible we come up to here, see a rejection there at the trend line. If you're looking at a target, it would likely be right around 75 to 76, maybe slightly below that. Depends on when we do get there, if we do get there. I would be aware of that because it is possible we go up to there, reject, and then come back to the downside. So let's look at euro dollar here. I know a lot of you guys are looking at it. It's something I'm actually looking at for the week ahead as well. So let's take a look. So if we jump back to the daily chart for euro dollar, we had this bigger ascending channel. It breaks to the downside. We're expecting at this point to get some sort of continuation to confirm this as more move to the downside. But if you look at what's happening now, it's more of a descending channel. With euro dollar, you want to be aware of dollar related strength. So if you're looking at euro dollar, look at the DXY as well, because it's going to give you an idea of how to expect euro dollar to move. Euro dollar and the DXY are very correlated, because when the DXY is strengthening, the euro is weakening. When the euro is strengthening, it's very likely the dollar is weakening. Has an inverse correlation. So we know we have this descending channel. If we jump down to the 1 hour, this was something we talked about in the last stream. We talked about the possibility and the potential that we do get a bigger pattern at this stage and the potential for a move to the upside. You can see we had a couple corrections and that moved to the upside. What happened from here is we started to get more dollar related strength, and we knew we had this ascending channel. At this point, it becomes very obvious that we can evolve this pattern and just look at current price action. So if we evolve it, we can see we just have an ascending channel. We had 1, 2, 3 touches down here at the bottom. So this pattern is valid, and that is, you could have used that to trade, but we moved off from this level here. We had 1, 2, 3, moved off, and the market gave us this. So we moved off, created just a flag right here on the trend line, and then we sold straight out of that. So looking at this for the week ahead, I am aware of what is going on with the DXY, but it's looking very nice for this as the move down, and then some sort of correction here to confirm it. So we're at about 5 hours here. I would literally give this a couple hours on market open, and it's likely to be a little bit slower. We got Labor Day here in the US. It's a bank holiday. It's likely to be a little bit slower anyways. But it's very likely we'll get some sort of continuation here that'll then continue this move to the downside. If you're looking at targets, it's very, very likely, very possible that we come all the way back down to at least the beginning of the correction. And I think if we're going to get that far, it's very, very likely we'll see a move down to here. The only thing that I would be aware of with this is it could turn around, right? So with the DXY, we do have a descending channel and a break out of that. It is possible for the DXY to come up a little bit, give us more weakness. The euro will reverse at that point. So if we do get continuation here, I will take it, but it's important to realize that you have to be aware of how the dollar is strengthening or weakening based on that. So I'm looking for a sell for euro dollar for the week ahead, but I'm being aware that until we get a couple more hours in this flag and then the breakdown, it's not confirmed as of just yet. But we definitely are looking for more downside. Head and shoulders forming on the 4 hour of Bitcoin. With head and shoulders, it's a very high probability pattern, but you can literally place that pattern on every move, right? It happens in many people's eyes a lot. So let's look at this. I could see what you're talking about. We have this move here, and then we have the head, and then potentially the shoulder. It's very, very possible that that plays out, if that is what you're talking about. But with that, again, we're just looking more as this is just a bear flag continuation to the downside to eventually sell anyways. So just looking at the pattern, we get that indication. So the unique thing about our strategy, that's a good question, Jacob, is that it is not swing or day. It's a combination of the two. We will hold positions for a long time if it makes sense. So in the case of this, if I took a short up here, if you took a short here, I would hold this position and just continue to hold it. I would have likely locked in profit at this area. I would just hold it until you get some sort of indication that the market is going to move back to the upside, lock in profit. If you get taken out, you get taken out. But it's a combination of the two. You can, with the strategy we use, the strategy we teach in the course, you can scalp, you can swing trade, and you can day trade. Depends on your personality and what you want to do. But you can definitely do all of those things, and it's a combination of the two. Are we going to impulse up or down with this tether movement? If we could say that for certain, if we had the inside scoop of when they trade tether, when they move tether, you can see when they move it, but when they actually put that into play, when they sell it, if we had that inside scoop, you could take advantage of a lot of different moves and make a lot of money. But nobody knows that for certain. And right now we just have a corrective ascending channel. That would normally, you would see a break to the downside. Now, obviously, if in the next 5 minutes we see an impulsive candle and it's up here, that's not going to be natural movement. We'll look at that as clear manipulation, right? Yep, 2 times, so the trend is your friend. With this pattern, it is very likely that we will see this reject, unless, of course, we do see some sort of craziness going on in the market. It would make sense at this point to see it reject, just based on the corrective movement we've had getting to this point. So if we had a different scenario, and this was much more of natural movement, we had maybe an impulse, correction, impulse, then we got here, you could address that differently and see that it's likely that we'll break out. But just based on corrective movement here, it is likely that we don't see this break to the upside at this point. If there's a huge amount of shorts and a huge amount of tether moving, are these things fighting each other? I'm not sure they're fighting each other necessarily. What I do see with it is, historically, when you do have a level of shorts, it is likely, and it goes for longs too, a lot of people look at shorts and say, well, shorts are high, so we'll see maybe a short squeeze, or longs are high, we'll see a long squeeze. It goes both ways. It's not just shorts, it's longs as well. But with tether movement and shorts being high, it is possible that tether is used to liquidate those shorts to then profit the exchange, or, as some people think, wash dirty money, which is very possible. So that's really where we're at with Bitcoin. You have to trade it understanding the risk, but also just looking at the pattern, it makes sense a lot of times. We do have some manipulation, but a lot of times the pattern will make a lot of sense for you, and you can make some really good trades just based on that. But understand that there is a level of manipulation going on in this market. You can't come into it with such a naive understanding that you think that that is not even happening. Movement of tether, it's when tether is printed and then moved from their cold storage to active storage on, let's say, BitThumb, for example, so that they can use it. Short squeeze coming. That is possible, and if we do get a short squeeze, I think it is very likely that we'll see that come back to the downside. We had it here, right? Clear manipulation, and the market rejected that. If you look at sentiment, you look at where volume is at on all the exchanges, you look at the way price is moving, the market is not accepting this kind of movement as sustainable, just based on that. So they can use Tether to either prop the market up, move the market up, or sell the market. They can use it both ways because both Bitfinex and BitMEX has a platform where you can move the market both ways. How would they wash money through alts? Well, it's one of those scenarios where if you have, let's say, an alt and you prop it up, you can sell into yourself, you can wash trade with yourself, or you can use orders from the market, actual traders, to wash money back and forth. So if you have a high volume alt, let's say like XRP, for example, there's a lot of volume going through that, and it's very possible and it's very easy to take advantage of the liquidity in a market like that to then wash money back and forth. And a lot of times wash trading, it goes with just the exchange. The exchange is moving money back and forth and washing money that way just to manipulate the price, get the price to a point, get shorts to a point, get longs to a point where they can actually either liquidate or move the market in the way they do want to. That's a good point. Every time Tether prints, people think there's a pump incoming. With that it's a good point. A lot of people are expecting a move to the upside. Whenever you have the majority of the people expecting a move to the upside, you have to ask yourself if that is very likely to happen. So how can they manipulate with Tether? There's a couple ways they could do it. Tether is essentially fake money, right? So you could sell Tether on the market for Bitcoin. That would move the market. They can also use it with their trading platforms to wash trade with themselves, to trade with traders on the market. It's essentially just a fake dollar that you can use to either buy Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin. You can do whatever you want with it. So that's how they would use it. We don't know exactly how they do use Tether, but we do know that they do use it to buy and sell, to manipulate the market that way. "1% stop loss will trigger very often." There is a misconception with that I do want to clear up. So a lot of people think when you say a 1% stop loss that you're talking about this number here. So that would mean that you're looking at this, right? You're looking at a very small stop. The way this tool works, and if you have it set up correctly, is this risk reward ratio is 2.2%. It's a 2 to 1. So if this trade played out exactly, you'd make 2%. You're only risking 1%. So if you move this up, you can have your stop all the way up here, for example. The risk reward is going to be a lot lower because your position size is a lot lower to compensate for this. So for example, if you have a $10,000 account and you're only trading 1% risk, you're trading $100 risk. So if this is equal to $100 based on how big this is, it's about 8.82% of a move. If this is equal to $100, then the position size here has to be congruent with that. So you can't have, let's say I have a $10,000 account. You can't have 100 Bitcoin here and then this equal to $100. So it's not 1%, a 1% move, it's 1% of your account. So if you look at settings, you can change here where risk is. So you can change this from 1%, 2%, whatever you want. We recommend 1%, and that is how you do adjust that. But you can place your stop wherever you want, but it just has to equal 1% of your account. So hopefully that answers your question. How do you gauge sentiment? To gauge sentiment, most of the time, all I'm looking at is the pattern. Most of the time, based on mass psychology, based on the way people do make decisions, you can look at the chart. You can see, well, this is just a lot of up and down movement. It's very corrective. The sentiment isn't there for a move to the upside. You can look at volume and see, well, volume levels are low. Typically, that happens in a correction. It's likely that the market is not accepting this, and it's very likely that we'll see a move to the downside. So the reason why you would use Tether instead of fiat is they can essentially print Tether whenever they want. So you think about having a printing press in your basement where you can print money whenever you want. That'd be pretty convenient, right? You want to go buy a car, you just go down in your basement, print some money, you go buy the car. It's essentially why they're using Tether. It's free money. They don't have to use their money. They can just print some fake money and use that. So it's a pretty genius system that they are using, but that is how it does work. And a lot of people don't understand how markets do work based on just the psychology of how people think. That's why, for example, if we have a area like this, we have this trend line, we have 1, 2, we get up to here, it's very likely, and it happens a lot, that we break through and then completely retrace, come back through. Why is that likely, and why does that happen? That happens because you'll have people going long here. It breaks through the trend line, gets everybody thinking this is an extraordinary opportunity to go long, completely retraces. Those people have to cover for their FOMO by closing their position, which fuels the move to the downside. Happens all the time. So whenever you have people caught on the wrong side of the market, price reacts violently, and people think very similarly at the end of the day. Why doesn't someone counterfeit Tether, as in create another project like Tether? There are a few stablecoins out there. We're not huge fans of stablecoins in general. I don't really see the point in it. There are some scenarios where I can see where the efficacy could be argued. We don't use them. It's not really something that we'll ever use. So, what are the chances Bitcoin doesn't break down in this channel and breaks up instead, given we have a bottom that's been tested multiple times? To get a move to the upside, natural progression, the market would give us that indication. So, for example, if we just move up correctively to here and see some sort of rejection here, to get a move to the upside naturally, we'll see this kind of pattern. We'll see a descending channel. Doesn't have to be that big. We'll see some sort of pattern like this, or maybe it's right here on the trend line. We'll see that indication naturally. So a lot of people, they'll talk about triangles and wedges and all that. A lot of times they're referring to the same thing, right? So there's a lot of terms people use. Most of the time I will refer to it as descending or ascending nature. It pretty much covers what you're looking at. It doesn't necessarily matter too much. For example, it doesn't matter if the angle of the pattern is this, or if it's this, or if it's something more like that. Obviously, there is a point at which you don't go all the way up here, but when you're looking at descending nature, if it's still descending, the angle doesn't matter a whole lot. Yeah, it would be, you could, I'm not really sure how you would counterfeit Tether because they own the mechanism for creating it. They pretty much control how it goes places. They control how it's sold. They control a lot of the different processes. So it'd be very tough to do that. So Tone says that wedges are useless. It doesn't really matter what you do call it, and it doesn't, like, a lot of people get caught up in, well, this is a triangle and that's a wedge, and this is, this is a sideways and that's this or that. It doesn't really matter the angle. The angle does not matter. What matters is, what is the price action doing? Is it corrective? And if it's corrective, is it ascending or is it descending? The angle doesn't matter. If it's corrective and it's ascending, we're going to be looking at as downside. That's how it works, because it's not sustainable. Angle doesn't really matter. I would not trade CNBC News. It's pretty poor as a news outlet, and it's basically trash as an outlet for trading news. You can, there's nothing wrong with using triangles or wedges or anything like that. But my point is that a lot of times the market will evolve and you'll still get the same pattern. It'll still give you the same result. It'll either sell or buy just as you think, but it'll evolve a little bit and give you more of an indication. Okay, this is more of a parallel channel. This is more of a triangle. This is more of an expanding, that kind of thing. It'll do the same thing. But no, I would not counter trade any kind of news. And the reason for that is there are some news events that happen and the price reacts. But a lot of the time, news will happen and it'll be super negative or super positive, and then you look at the chart and nothing happens. Because it's incredibly hard to know what news events the masses will respond to. So I wouldn't trade news too much. I don't trade it in Forex, and I definitely don't trade it too much in crypto. The very end of July looks like a descending channel and even had a small upward impulse into it, then turned into a sell. What am I reading wrong there? I see what you're saying. Let's take a look at that quickly here. And then we'll answer a couple more questions. We'll wrap this up. So if you go back and watch our videos, you'll know, or you've been with us for a while, you know that we were looking for this ascending channel. We were looking for the break to the downside. We got that break to the downside. It happened. But then what happened afterwards confused a lot of people. And honestly, it was a lot of manipulation, right? This whole move here, it's a lot of manipulation. All right, to look at this, to actually take for a buy, I would be looking at, okay, we had an impulse here, but then what happened? It just cracks, right? So we have a correction here, it impulses out, we have a correction, and then this whole thing is a correction. So it would not be wrong to look at the market like this after this breaks out. The only reason I would be looking at the market like this is because we only have this essentially as the impulse in this. The rest of this is just very corrective. And so you could look at it, that was a valid ascending channel that broke to the downside. But then what happened afterwards is we didn't really get that indication that it would continue because of this corrective nature. So that's how I would look at that. What company makes Tether? Bitfinex owns Tether. The same entities behind Bitfinex are the same entities behind Tether. If you look into the history, they created Tether likely to solve some of their solvency issues and very, very likely to manipulate the market and also possibly to launder money. So we'll give it a couple more minutes here and then we'll wrap up. If there's any other questions you guys have, happy to answer that. Then we'll wrap up here. Try and cut it off at 2 hours, about an hour and 57 now. MACD versus RSI. Talk about that briefly. I don't use MACD very much at all. RSI is the only indicator that was studied that actually had some use and was actually reliable to trade based off, to build a strategy off. RSI was the only indicator they found that was consistently reliable in that sense. If I was to use RSI, and I will occasionally look at it, it's going to be as confluence on top of what I'm seeing on the chart structurally. What the pattern is looking like, it's going to be confluence on top of that. Carlos, I'm not sure I understand your question. How much are you talking about targets for Bitcoin today? Love hearing that. You know, when you do go from looking at indicators to removing them and just trading price action, it is a learning curve. And you will find that it can be more confusing at the start, but then over time the clarity comes in, and like you said, you'll build up a lot of consistency with it. So targets today, because it is the weekend, because Labor Day's tomorrow, because of all that, it would not be uncommon to see this kind of just not move a whole lot. So I'm not looking to trade Bitcoin right now. I don't believe there is a very valid setup. So I'd wait and let the market give you something that makes sense to trade. There's nothing really here that you would jump in a trade on and take it for any kind of target. There's just not a whole lot there. Can Tether crash the market? Tether can manipulate the market. It can move it up and down. If Tether is shut down, that will have an impact on the market. The reason why is a lot of the moves you see are propped up by Tether. So if Tether is removed, you're going to see more natural price action. If we see a lot of the manipulation removed with Tether, you're going to see more natural price action, but that may be slower, right? And you may see a large drop before it actually normalizes and we start seeing natural price action. So the market could drop by quite a bit if Tether does get shut down, which a lot of people see as a very negative thing. I think would be much better to see Tether get shut down, the market drop by a ton, then normalize, see some exchange regulation to prevent this from happening again. If manipulation continues, and if we see manipulation just go on and on for years and years and years and years and years, it will, without a doubt, kill the idea of cryptocurrency. But we don't see that as going to happen because the government is involved in this and they are looking into these legal activities. It will get shot down. It's just a matter of when. Exchanges for shorting, there aren't a whole lot. There's virtually none. You can look at, I believe a lot of people are using OneFox. Problem with that is liquidity is extremely low, so spreads can be, $60, $50, something like that. So if you're trading on OneFox, you want to make sure that your moves are big enough and you don't just jump in a trade whenever. There aren't a whole lot of options right now, though. I notice you don't use moving averages. We don't use them very much at all. Here's why. And it's worth noting that when we first started trading, we used every different strategy. Every strategy out there, we've used it. With moving averages, they are virtually useless in a period like this. They will give you no indication whatsoever of where the price is going to go. Maybe you'll see a moving average move through here. That it will look just like that. It'll mean exactly nothing. You can see here, well, we had a reaction here and a reaction here, right? And I just drew that on there. A lot of the reactions are coincidental and don't mean a whole lot with moving averages, EMAs, that kind of thing. They don't move a whole lot. Do you think the U.S. economy dropping, correcting would be positive for Bitcoin? I will address this quickly and then we'll wrap it up. Some people think that if, let's say, the stock market goes down, that a lot of the investors take their money and dump it into Bitcoin. I can say without a doubt that is not going to happen. Here's why. If you're investing on the stock market and you are a large trader, you're trading large capital. Your goal is to make money, right? You're not going to take, several $100,000 or more, dump it into a speculative asset that is proven to be manipulative. You're not going to say, okay, well, the stock market's going down. I'm going to take my money, dump it into a speculative asset that at this point is very risky. You're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. If the dollar goes down, I think you'll see a very similar thing. You're not going to see people say, well, the dollar is losing value, the economy is going down, let's go buy Bitcoin. Some people will, but I wouldn't use that, and I wouldn't say that that is going to happen. I wouldn't base any trading decisions on that. So hope that answers your questions. We're going to wrap it up here. Been going for about 2 hours. If you guys have any other questions related to the stream, if you're in Slack, drop them in Slack. We'll be happy to answer those questions. And then if you have a question you're not in Slack, just drop a comment on this once it does go live after it processes, and we'll answer those as well. We appreciate you guys sticking with us. We appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day to watch the stream, hang out with us here. We hope it was a valuable information. You got a lot out of this. Stay tuned for more updates on progression in the community, what we want to do with the community, more live streams, the splitting of live streams. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Take care, guys.